Welcome to Why the Long Face? Two old friends lifting the lid on mental health over a beer with author and psychiatrist Paul Keedwell and business consultant and so-called comedian Ollie Turnbull.
Hi, and welcome to the very first episode of the very first season of our new podcast, Why the Long Face? A podcast about mental health, the first season of which is going to deal with depression, and this is the very first episode. In it, we're going to talk about coming out, which is basically acknowledging that you might be suffering and reaching out to friends and family as the first step to recovery.
Have you got your beer there?
Oh, yeah.
I was going to open mine, I think. Yeah.
Oh.
Have you opened yours yet?
I've opened it, yeah. I'm a bit ahead of you.
Have a little bit of a swig, I think.
It's not supposed to be about the beer, is it? It's supposed to be about...
No, but we're supposed to do the episode. It's over a beer, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is.
So the episode lasts as long as the beer lasts.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
So if you're really thirsty one day, it's going to be... You're not going to get value for money because it's going to be over in 20 minutes.
It's a great premise. I like that premise. The premise is over a beer, and you have a beer.
You're talking about the
right,
premise while we were live recording. This is going to be on the finished product,
But
man.
people need to know the premise.
Okay.
People need to know the premise. They don't know us.
All right.
They probably,
It's not a smooth start.
I like it.
I'm a bit embarrassed already.
I like it. I think we slid into it really nicely.
Oh God! You're not going to do sexual innuendos, are you, all the way through?
Might do.
Okay,
I promise nothing. I promise nothing. And
Well, let me slide into our subject of the evening, which
nice.
is...
And we're doing a segues already. We've only just started doing podcasts.
Man,
And
you know all the lingo. I'm just a psychiatrist. I don't know what I'm doing. So today we're talking about... you wanted to talk about... what did you want to talk about?
Well, the premise of the whole thing is I work in business. I work in consultancy. I've seen what I think is a prevalence of mental illness, anxiety, but depression mostly. You're a psychiatrist. I've known you for 30 years, and I'm interested in not exactly the lighter side of depression, but I'm just interested in sort of undemonizing it and getting people to understand it a little bit more. And it's all wound up in this thing about people being more open about their mental health these days. And so that's the central premise of the podcast. So we thought we'd talk about the stigma, I suppose, and coming out. I mean, that's the...
Coming out with depression. Which is because you were saying there was a guy at work who you were really surprised today when he actually said to you, no, it wasn't my mother, it was me. I was depressed.
It was an amazing moment, and we started to call it, you and I, coming out. Because it is sort of like that, because there is a ridiculous and unnecessary shame about it, and there is a reticence of people to admit to it. I'm finding more and more people are doing it, but that's exactly what it felt like when this lad said to me, and it's happened to me more and more. I get sort of older and more in position of management, and I see this with people that I'm responsible for, and I feel, quite sort of paternal over them. And when this lad came out, the sort of look came over his face, not of shame, which was nice, but of trust, actually. And he obviously trusted me to confide in me that he was a depressive.
Right.
And the funny thing was...
How old was he?
He's 30.
Right, okay.
And he confided to me in his mother's depression, and he confided to me, started to today, in his own depression. Right. And I'm obviously going to pick it up with him and see how he gets on. But the interesting thing was, and this is quite funny in a way, and I think you've got to see the humour in it, or else another podcast of depression is just going to be miserable. And he still has a prejudice about depressed people, almost, because he was like, I know it's tedious, and the last thing I want to talk about is misery. That just makes it worse. And he sort of sniggered, as if even being a depressive person, he still sort of had a residual, even he, and someone who you'd expect wouldn't have, has got a slight sort of, downer on. Which is interesting.
I suppose there is the truism, which is that it's kind of difficult to be around someone when they're in their depths of depression, isn't it? Do you think?
I would imagine. I've not lived with someone who's been deeply depressed, but it must be difficult. You love them and you want them not to suffer, and B, of course, being around someone who's miserable rubs off, I would imagine. I want to pick up on your other point, actually, which is really interesting, which is it's okay to be socially detached. And of course it is.
Did I say it's okay to be socially detached?
Yeah.
I think I said it was a part of depression. I didn't say it was necessarily something that people would necessarily want.
No, but I think you said, but it's okay to be socially detached. And is it a natural state? Because I don't want to talk about your book because you get far too big-headed. But your book...
Oh, I love to. Let's
talk about your book.
It's funny you should
10
mention
years
my
ago,
book,
your book.
my How Sadness Survived book.
Yes, I believe that's the title.
Which,
When you get number 120,000, I think, in the Amazon top million.
So kind.
I'm joke. I like the book and I like the central premise. I like the theory. How Sadness Survived is that it serves a purpose.
Still on the first print run.
Yes, I've got an original. I've got an original impression.
Well, that idea certainly I thought would be a nice counterpoint to the stigma that's around about depression being a kind of weakness or even dangerous or
a sign of madness
or a sign of madness or something that's socially contagious. If you have a depressed person in the room, is it going to spread to everybody else and bring the party down? You know.
Exactly. Whereas actually, is it as your thesis in your book says, is it a natural reaction to unbearable stress?
Well, it's certainly not a weakness of personality. I hate that idea. What my book was examining was the idea that if you're engaged in an endeavour which is not leading to any kind of fruitful payoff and you're completely, and that's stressing you out over time, depression will eventually kick in to put the brakes on, take you out the side of that situation where you're chasing that rainbow and not getting there, because it's an impossible, for whatever reason, it's an impossible goal,
which actually might not be rational, but if that's how you're feeling, you'll be trapped in that cage that you can't escape from. And then you talk about the learned helplessness of the experiments with dogs.
Well, that's it. It's seen in all mammals. The original learned helplessness experiments by Seligman were designed to shock the dog so that the dog was in a cage and there were electrified plates on the floor, and the dog initially was able to move away from one side of the cage to the other to escape the shock. And then the paradigm shifted so that wherever the dog moved, they were shocked. And that carried on for a while until the dog then decided, okay, well, I'm just going to conserve energy here. I'm not stupid. It's going to, whatever happens.
Natural. Did he try on children?
I'm helpless to do anything to escape this shock. And then they reverted to the original paradigm, so the dog was able to escape the shocks, but the dog remained motionless. I think that was the important thing. So the dog had then adopted a state of learned helplessness. So even when the dog was then able to move around to escape the adversity, it no longer did. So that's sort of a good analogy for depression. And
I think it's funny. And if you were depressed, put yourself in a depressed person's situation, and you were told you are suffering terribly, but it's a natural response, do you think that would be of some comfort?
Yeah, I think it is of some comfort. Yeah, this idea that you can keep straining the spring for a while until it goes past its elastic limit, and then it doesn't go back again. It's not only is that something that is probably part of the human condition, but is also pretty common.
There's another thing. So it's part of the human condition, but it exists as a safety catch. If you withdraw yourself, if you have a irresistible urge to withdraw yourself from this stressful situation, that's going to be good for you because the brain can reset, perhaps.
This is the thought that, well, once you're out of that situation, as long as you catch depression early enough, you might be able to work out what went wrong and not do that again. I think the idea is that you make more radical changes then, because depression really is quite a debilitating condition.
Yeah.
You can't just shrug it off and next day carry on doing the same thing. So it's going to be around for weeks or months. Depression
sounds like a bit of a cliche, but your brain is trying to tell you something quite literally. It's not madness at all, and it's not weakness. It is a reaction. It's like blacking out if you've got not enough sugar in your blood system.
This idea that it's a defence rather than a disorder,
right?
Or defence rather than a disease, if you like. Yeah,
I would have thought that's very helpful to a sufferer.
Yeah,
because it must be overwhelming. You must think I'm going insane. You must think I'll never feel the same again. It must be fairly dramatic in order for you to be socially withdrawn, I would have thought.
Yeah.
So what's your bell curve? You were dying to talk about the bell curve.
No, forget the bell. Well, the bell curve
How can
I've
you
already
forget the
said.
bell
So
curve?
that's like most people, I think, would be prone to depression under certain circumstances. So then that is comforting, I think, because one of the things people experience when they're depressed is, oh God, I'm a freak. I'm going crazy. They're feeling guilt and shame. They're already, ironically, because of the condition, sort of beating themselves up about being depressed.
Yeah.
I should be better than this. I should be functioning better than this. Rather than if you had flu, you'd be like, you wouldn't be thinking, I should be functioning better than this. Yeah. You'd be like, no, I'm going to have to stay in my bed until I feel better. And if you're depressed, it's okay to do that too. It's like, well, I'm just going to be patient with myself until I get better. I realise I'm not going to be able to do as much. And I think what friends and family can do during that is have fewer expectations of them. Don't say, snap out of it and all that stuff. Realise that this is not something they're going to be able to snap out of quickly, but patiently perhaps escort them to do various activities, but not expecting much. And
set reasonable targets. Maybe
reasonable targets.
Get people to do something in the day.
And there's still, most people who are depressed will have a capacity for some pleasure. So pleasant activity scheduling is one of the things that psychologists talk about, where in the early acute phases of depression, before you start perhaps going deeper into what psychological factors were leading you to put yourself in this stressful situation.
Are you talking about getting out of the crisis?
Getting out of the crisis, or just being kind to yourself while you're in that rather moribund state.
Great use of the word moribund.
You don't want to be moping about all day with your own depressive thoughts.
What I really like about this theory you're talking about is the use of the word moribund, which I knew you talked over, but that was excellent. But also treating it as if it was flu, treating as if it was you needed insulin, and we'll come on to drugs in a later episode, and to where they play. But to just consider it to be a normal state of mind. It's a shitty thing that's happening to me, but I'm going to manage it and have my friends and family help me manage it. I think that must be a very, very positive message for sufferers. I hope it is. I hope people...
Well, so I do find that there are some bosses out there that are really, really great, because I've had some patients in my clinic where they said that they've told the boss, they've been absolutely terrified to tell the boss for what they might say, and the boss has gone, oh God, that's awful. No, your mental health comes first, absolutely. Do you want to reduce your hours? Do you want to take time off? Probably the best thing for most people is to reduce the hours, because
you don't want to do nothing, because that's what rumination presumably comes in.
Well, I think then you might have that added layer of oh God, I'm useless,
Yeah, that's right. That's ironically. Yeah. Oh God, he doesn't want me to do anything.
It depends how severely depressed you are. But what is important for people is to know that people care about them, but those people are not putting huge amounts of pressure on them to perform as they were, which they wouldn't do if you had flu, right? They wouldn't say, oh, come on, get out of bed.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Yeah. Or if you had a broken leg,
That was weak. I can't believe your bone snapped with just that amount of talk.
Why can't you walk on your broken leg again after a week?
Come on, Spartans could.
Come on,
when they were stoning the Stoics.
You got to pay. There's work to be done.
Yeah, it's true. I can imagine that being I think it was really interesting. You talk about work, and not only you can be a good boss by saying, I completely understand what you need to do, but also suggest reduced hours, because you can imagine a highly stressful job, long hours being one of the causes of getting into an exhausted state, which potentially leads to depression. Not only having someone who's sympathetic, but having someone who's sort of part of the solution, which is we'll have you do 2 days, so you'll still feel that you're contributing, and you'll potentially get out of this. It's a very, very sort of optimistic way of thinking.
Well, we've got a long way to go. This British Social Attitudes Survey from 2016, when presented with a description of a person experiencing symptoms which met the diagnostic criteria of depression, 82% said they wouldn't feel comfortable having them look after their children.
Whoa.
Well, I guess some people are sensitive about their kids, but nevertheless, 80%.
I suppose even the most minor risk, you'd say no way.
But then 64% wouldn't feel comfortable having them marry into their family. Well, that's a bit harsh.
That's high, man.
Because that you just think, where does that come from? Does it come from an idea that, oh, well, they're depressed, they've got depression, they're always going to be like that, or they're depressed because they're weak and they'll probably have another one?
They'll have kids who are depressed. I don't know. What are people thinking?
I don't know. And 35% wouldn't feel comfortable having them as a colleague.
That is still a hell of a lot of people. 1 in 3 people saying, I wouldn't feel happy having them as one of your colleagues. So what's that going to make you feel if you are depressed? Is that going to make you feel you want to come out and say, oh, hi, I'm suffering from depression. I'm feeling a bit bad today. I might go home early because I suffer from depression. It's not going to help. I don't blame these people for having these prejudices. It's simply ignorance.
It's ignorance and fear, isn't it?
Changed. Yeah, and it's I don't actually blame or am angry with these people. I'm surprised, but it's got to be about education, surely.
Well, I think it's counterproductive for an employer to say they wouldn't feel comfortable having someone who's had depression or is going through depression as a colleague, because if that colleague's valuable to you, if that colleague has skills you need and aptitudes you need, then it's absolutely in your interest to nurture them back to health. Be a bit patient and do whatever you can for them.
It's funny. It's like saying I wouldn't really fancy having a diabetic sat next to me at work. It's that crazy. Someone who's got a slight insulin imbalance.
Well, there's probably more days off work caused by back problems than there are by depression.
I'm very uncomfortable working with someone with a back problem. Very, very. I wouldn't have a married the family. That's for sure. Someone with a back problem marrying into the family.
So if it's just about days off work, or it's just about work performance, that's not.
Is it people are
on that basis? You would say, I don't want anyone over the age of 40 who's likely to have lower back problems.
Lifting up my child. Do you think
passing the salt?
There's a sort of medieval
or
fear,
passing the beer,
a sort of primeval fear of mental health, in that it equates in some people's minds, and again, I don't blame them for this prejudice, to madness. And people have a natural fear of madness because our brains are what differentiates us from the other animals. Madness is a sign of something awry in the brain, and therefore I don't want to be close to it, I don't want to be associated with it. But your theory is it's nothing to do with madness, it's to do with a perfectly sane brain acting in a perfectly rational way because it's been overloaded. And that takes away, to me, a lot of that fear about I'm sat next to a depressive, I'm sat next to a madman or madwoman.
Yeah, well, you can't keep, carrying on in a state of stress without there being consequences. Something's going to give eventually. We're not superhuman. We have a brain that is adapted for a hunter-gatherer environment where if we had situations of extreme stress, it was easier for us to take time out. We were living in close-knit communities where other people would take on your role for a while and it'd be in their best interests and, in fact, important for their survival to nurture you back.
Something that just occurred to me, no judgment, right? So if you're one of the people who's supposed to be out on a hunt and you're lying down and you're disengaged with the rest of the tribe aren't going to go, well, he's rubbish.
Depressed warrior.
That's your title for the next
like their third album.
No. That's right, they went a bit experimental, didn't they? They were supporting Pulp last time. So anyway, point is...
Were they reformed?
Depressed warrior?
No, Pulp.
No, it was a gag. Anyway, depressed warrior lies down.
Gag on top of some real facts.
No, that'd be great, wouldn't it? Jarvis,
It won't be long,
It's got to be. He's got to be running out of money.
Maybe.
One Direction, they're reforming.
No, he did all right. He's probably a fair amount of dosh from Radio 6, didn't he?
Yeah, but that lady on keyboard,
Andy's not doing that
she
anymore.
wants some money.
Yeah, she'll want a bit of money.
She'll have an unexpected tax bill.
What's her name?
My point
was her name?
I can't remember.
She was great.
Yeah. So your depressed hunter is just going to chill out, and they're just going to allow it. They've got no choice really. They're not going to kill the guy. They're just going to leave him, and then eventually, because that comes a period of history where we used to kill.
Well, I guess if you killed him, you wouldn't have to feed him. I don't know. It's a thought.
No, yeah.
But no,
Let's put that to the chief. What's happened to a depressed warrior? His musical output's gone down. Kill him. It's fine.
He's not going to be lying on the floor. I mean, presumably he could be put on cooking duties or I don't know, tearing flesh off bone duties or whatever. Gathering berry. No, I don't know.
Gathering. That's stressful. The hunters were the top dogs. And if you're a bit depressed, you're a gatherer. I'm not feeling up to hunting.
Maybe a shelter builder, or maybe you mended the shelter.
It's funny you put
the shelter's always going to need a bit of maintenance.
You know, just by putting on the end of something, doesn't make it a job, like shelter builder or making of the fencer.
Well, we don't have words for it because we're not hunter-gatherers anymore.
No.
We went to the what's that?
Farming, I think it's called, isn't it?
Rift Valley, and asked them. They might have a word for it.
Sadly, we can't. We're all too depressed.
I mean, campfire builder.
That's a nice one. That would
Right?
probably be quite prestigious.
It's a fairly minimal.
It's frustrating, isn't it, though? If you're depressed.
Very minimal effort.
What?
Which is perfect for a depressed person.
Together? Have you ever tried?
Yeah, but you only have to do it for. It's only going to take you if you know what you're doing.
No, you'll get
a couple of
doing
minutes
that with the flint.
And a great result, right? Which is going to make you feel less.
I'm useless at everything. I can't even light a fire. I don't think that's going to be a great job for a depressed person.
You don't really think it through, do you?
No.
I was just thinking of the upside.
Do you know what I think?
If he lights it and it turns into a roaring fire, it's going to perk him up a bit. I was just thinking the upside. I wasn't thinking about oh my god.
Well, have you ever tried to use flint? It's an absolute nightmare. I mean, it's enough to make you depressed, even if you were fine before you started flinting. If you were starting the flint.
God, the humiliation. Someone would take the flint off you and do it. Oh god.
Right, you're back on berries. You twat.
Back on berries.
But I've just come off berries.
No. Well, look. No, we don't know. Having to guess what hunter-gatherers, because these days hunter-gatherers are not. They're all exposed to modern life anyway, aren't they?
And relatively cheerful.
There's all a bit. But I did read that there was somewhere that perhaps the incidence or prevalence of depression was lower in hunter-gatherers. But I'd need to follow that up.
I still like your theory. How sadness survived. I mean, even if the prevalence was less, and the Hong Kong example of the postnatal is brilliant because there's probably a link. I mean, you can't say it scientifically between support from the family and lack of postnatal depression. Postnatal depression, my idea of hell, it must be absolutely awful. People are expecting you to be happy. What a wonderful thing has happened in your life, and you're feeling depressed. It must be just hideous. But I can't help but thinking it's always had a role.
Well, I think it's all about. I think what's critical to people's reducing people's prejudices is pointing out the fact that depression is something that is an episode, just like an episode of viral illness. It is an episode. I think the people that end up, there are certain interesting studies that have suggested that those who end up with chronic depression are the ones that've got something else going on. Maybe drug or alcohol misuse, physical, like a chronic physical pain.
So actually stress isn't going away.
Right, kind of right. So when there's something else that's perpetuating it. And of course there are sociological factors in modern life that weren't there for hunter-gatherers that will entrap you in certain social situations.
With a hunter-gatherer brain still wired to hunter-gatherer.
Not wired for that. We're not wired for living up 10 floors up in a council flat. Your personal independence payments being denied. You've got, I don't know, a boyfriend who beats you or something, and you've got a kid that you've got to raise. I don't know, all those sorts of things.
Or even deadlines at work, even more prosaic things like I've got a report.
Or middle-class stresses.
Middle-class stresses.
Well, you've got a mortgage to pay, haven't you?
You've got a mortgage to pay.
And someone could make you redundant. Yeah. And then what are you going to do if you've got kids as well? And that thing of how we suddenly moved from a situation in the 1950s where you could raise a family on one income. We're now in a situation where you can't raise a family without two incomes.
And it all seems
we allowed that to happen.
And panicky, and I can't get out of this. And there's a cycle, even from being trapped in a high rise to an abusive relationship. Looking up for it. Always that stress of not being able to escape.
So to sum up then, we have been talking about stigma, I guess, and coming out, and we have covered the idea that ain't your problem, ain't your fault that you got depressed. It's because of the way modern life's set up sometimes, right?
Yeah, and your brain's wired. It's an escape mechanism for when the pressure gets too much. Yeah. That's what I've learnt.
Yeah. So I hope this has been kind of interesting and useful in some respects. What we're going to do in future episodes is we're going to try and tail them with some depressive heroes, right?
Well, that's a good idea.
Yeah. So people around at the moment, not your hunter-gatherers.
Or dead ones.
You
can be dead people, can't
you? Ruby Wax, the people that we think who've suffered from depression, had fairly major depressions, but also achieved immense things in life.
By the way, we're not making out that there's something heroic about being depressed. What these people are people who have been depressed and are heroes in our eyes because they've been honest about it, open about it, and they've let people know about it and helped and helped other people.
But even if they hadn't been honest about it and talked about it, they're still heroes, right? Because not all the people we're going to talk about necessarily come out.
That's a very good point. So that's absolutely right, actually. So it's either that, and that tends to be the more modern hero, or heroes from the past who, looking back on their lives, look like they suffered heavily from depression and yet achieved amazing things.
Hey, thanks for joining us on Why the Long Face. As ever, we're here to inform, hopefully, and entertain, but we're not here to give you medical advice. There is, however, information on our website about where to get help. See you next time.